Hi, you're listening to Madeline Hills, Rio Olympic Finalist in the 3000m Steeple Chase and 5000 metres. You're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, the show that takes you behind the scenes of how the world's top and most inspiring physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey in getting there. Today's show is lovingly brought to you by POGO Physio. We exist to help you perform at your physical best through our industry-first, fixed price and unlimited access 2, 6, and 12-week finish line programs. We want everyone who walks through our doors to make sure they get across their finish line, that high five moment where we get to tell you we love you, but we hope we don't see you soon, as you walk out with a complete and remarkable solution to your injury. All backed by our unique finish line guarantee, which is basically short for, if you're not happy, we're not happy. We just want to make sure you get your result. So check it out online, POGO Physio's industry-first finish line physiotherapy programs. Guys, I hope you enjoyed last week's episode featuring Chloe McArdle. What an incredible athlete Chloe is. There's been lots of feedback coming through about Chloe's episode. Why would there not be? How could there not be? I mean, swimming 3 English Channel crossings and, 124 kilometres continuous. What an insight into ultra endurance performance. Those listeners that have left reviews, a hearty and massive thank you. You guys make this show possible, and the reviews really help the Physical Performance Show get more visible and in more earbuds of listeners who, just like you and I, we're keen on pursuing our physical best performance. A special shout out to Baz Savage, who gave the Physical Performance Show 5 stars, noting it as fantastic. Baz said or commented, "Great podcast, so inspiring." Baz, love your work. Thanks very much, and I'm glad you're enjoying the episodes. Also, big shout out and thank you to Old Man from Canberra. Big fan, 5 stars by We Run Together. Really appreciate the review here. Absolutely love this podcast. The pedigree of guests Brad manages to attract and avail them to be interview is a testament to the esteem in which the predominantly Australian elite athletes hold him. I really enjoy the openness and honesty from the athletes. This honesty and openness can only be attributed to the feeling of comfort and casualness that Brad encourages as a result of his enthusiasm, professionalism, knowledge, and love for what he does. Keep it up, Brad. Love your work, 100%. Thanks so much. We Run Together. Really appreciate that review. Listeners, if you'd like to leave a review, it's simple. Jump into iTunes, click ratings and review, and rate away. 1 star equals okay, 5 stars equals great. Whatever you rate it, I'd appreciate it. It really does give me a lot of feedback, and also really inspires me to keep these interviews coming to yourselves as the faithful listening audience. Listeners, this week you are in for a real treat. I had the distinct privilege and pleasure of catching up recently with Madeline Hills Knee-Hiner. Madeline has a story that I think is really quite unique for the Physical Performance Show guests that we've had on so far. Madeline was an aspiring up-and-coming junior runner who experienced great success on the track. Maddie then fell on some tough times. Madeline represented Australia in the 3000m Steeple Chase at the 2014 Glasgow Commonwealth Games, where Madeline finished 4th. Off the back of that, Madeline fell out of love, if you like, with running and with athletics, and went on what was essentially an 8-year hiatus from the sport. In this interview, Maddie talks about how she found her love again for the sport, and in less than 18 months of training, went from her first return run, which she outlines during the interview, through to representing Australia at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games in both the 3000m Steeple Chase and the 5000 metres, where Maddie placed 7th and 10th respectively. Maddie also in this interview shares how she has, up until the Rio Olympic Games, juggled both a professional pharmacy career alongside her professional running aspirations. So there's a whole lot in this that anyone that's out there seeking to perform at their physical best is going to really take from it. So guys, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did in bringing it to you. Here's Maddie Hills. Let's jump straight in. Listeners, we have Miss Madeline Hills, knee highner, joining us on this episode of the Physical Performance Show. And as per Madeline's very impressive bio, I think you're going to really enjoy this. So Madeline, great to have you on the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Miss Madeline, let's start with something a little bit curly out of the gates, and that is, what's something that scares Madeline Hills?
Okay, in life, swans. I've been running around Albert Park lately, and there's a couple of swans that hang out in Albert Park, and they terrify me. I go totally off the path to get around them, so I'm definitely scared of swans. In running, I guess it's just finishing a competition and not having given it my all. Something I've definitely done plenty of times, and it's not a very nice feeling. And I guess going into a race, the main thing I want to achieve is to fall over that finish line and know that whatever the result was, that it was everything I had that day. So yeah, scared, I suppose, of not committing wholly to a race.
And I don't think, excuse me, Madeline, that's a unique fear of your own. I think it's certainly seems to be a common theme across performers at large that that they'd fear that they didn't give every ounce of themselves. Did you say, just to clarify, Madeline, that you have had races where you felt like you didn't give it your all, or did I misinterpret that? No,
you interpreted that correctly. I think that's one of the skills I'm still learning. Learning to perfect. I think the first few years in my comeback and definitely in my junior career as well, I had a tendency just to hold back that little bit. And, as much as it's nice to finish a race feeling fresh, it obviously doesn't mean you've really put everything into it. So, no, it is something I have experienced plenty of times. And, even if I've ended up with a good result on paper, there's still plenty of races that I feel I probably didn't quite grit my teeth enough. It's something that's becoming less frequent, but I'm still working on.
And what would be the sort of thing, Madeline, that would hold you back in, fully emptying the tank, so to speak? Is it this unfamiliarity with your limits, or is it a fear of the pain, or what is it?
Yeah,
Madeline?
I think it's a combination of the two, really. Just maybe having that apprehension in a race that maybe you're going to go too soon, or that you're going to hit the wall too soon. And in reality, I'd actually prefer that to happen, and to know I gave it a good crack than for the alternative. But I think just sometimes in that moment it can be difficult to really find that reason or find that extra incentive to get everything out of you. So I think it's becoming less frequent, that feeling of crossing the line and thinking, gosh, I think I had a little bit more. But that's definitely something I hope to improve on, and I think I will, just with experience. I certainly have with experience.
And absolutely, I mean, phase 2 of your running life, which we'll dig into in this interview, but it's really in phase 2, which isn't that long in years for phase 2 for you. Just out of interest, Madeline, when was the last time, just on this, this in the tank being a bit full at times, when was the last time you felt like in a competition you finished? How long ago are we talking where you're like, well, you know what, I had more in me?
Look, I was really happy with the end of my season. So the end of 2016 I was obviously happy with, and obviously the Olympics is part of that. I guess a couple of the races just before then, in my lead into the Olympics, a bit of uncertainty, I guess, about where my form was at, just coming in with a few injuries and missed training and things like that. So I suppose I have a little bit of an excuse in terms of having uncertainty, but at the same time, obvious regret in not quite committing. So I did a couple of Diamond Leagues prior to the Olympics, Oslo and Stockholm. Doha. My couple of races leading into the Olympics I wasn't really wrapped with, but parts of the races were good, but I think there was a little bit left in the tank in those ones, but fortunately I corrected that by the Olympics.
I might have an antidote, I think, Madeline. I don't know if you're open for suggesting, but those
Sure.
swans that you've been dodging, maybe we put a few of those on.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, or maybe picture that might be what I can work on, a bit of visualization.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing so openly, Madeline. That's great. Madeline, tell me, obviously, you've had great success last year, the year of 2016, the calendar year, where you represented Australia at the Rio Olympic Games. But before we go through, I'd like to actually take us back, because you've got a fascinating journey that I think listeners will really, some will have lived this sort of life, some will just resonate with what it took to make what is your comeback. So I really want to unpack that. So Madeline, let's rewind the clock. I believe you grew up Shell Harbour, New South Wales, South Coast girl. What was growing up like? Did you know you had some gifting as an athlete and as a runner?
So I grew up in Kiama, just south of Shell Harbour, a little coastal town, about 20,000 people, I think. I'm the youngest of three siblings. I would say we were an active family, but not a sporting family. I don't remember really being involved in many organised sports at all. My brother had a go at everything. My sister doesn't like sport, doesn't really like sweating.
Your sister, younger or older?
She's older. Yeah. She's older. Yeah, she'll admit to that I won't get in trouble for that comment.
Well, you do all the sweating for her, don't you?
Yes, I think so.
So you had your sister and brother? Yep.
Yeah, and my brother's not much older than me, so I usually played with him and, was active with him. Every family holiday we'd go to my grandparents' property, which is about 8 hours from Kiama, so I guess close to Deniliquin, and we'd ride bikes and play with the cows and swim in the channel. So we were very active, but not a whole lot of organised sport. And I guess I got into running the same way most people do, just through, school carnivals. I was quite young at school, so the only year I really remember in primary school competing outside of, the school carnival was in year 6. And I did run quite well. I think I went to nationals and got a medal in the cross country. But I certainly wasn't training or anything like that. I think the schools around mine used to all combine and do a training session. If you made regionals, once a week you'd all meet and you do a little bit of a training session, and from memory it was something like running around the school grounds and then running from one tree and back and a few little reps like that, and then you got to go to state and go and see how you went. So that was sort of my primary school involvement. Yep. And
was state just at Eastern Creek there, or where was state?
It was. Yes, it was Eastern Creek.
So New South Wales. So you were I'm about 7 years on you, Maddie. So all right, so off you went to Eastern Creek and ran state. And how'd you go at state? Were you a medalist at this level or this stage of your...
I certainly, I think about 5 go to nationals, so I imagine I was possibly top 3. I don't really remember. I think I came second at nationals when I was under 10, which was great and, just showed that I was, I suppose, athletic. But, we didn't get hugely excited by it or anything like that. I ran little athletics for 1 year.
Yep.
And then I decided I was going to high school. I went to high school when I was 10 years old, so I was quite young.
Wow, yeah, I was trying to do the maths on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very young, and I thought once you went to high school, you couldn't be a little athletic anymore. So I told Mum I didn't really want to do that anymore, and I headed off to high school.
Wow! So I didn't even know what high school was at 10, Madeline. So you've always been quite advanced on your Kiama upbringing. The very first guest, Madeline, on the program was Ali Day. You must have crossed paths with Ali, hailed out of Kiama. Did you at all? Surf Lifesaver, Ironman?
No, I didn't. I guess the real local neighbour, I guess, would be someone like Sally Fitzgibbons, who's just a year or two younger than me, the surfer, of course. But no, I don't know.
All right.
Ali.
Well, I'll have to.
But I was only there until I was about 11, 12, and then we moved up to Wollongong.
Okay, so maybe there was maybe you were too busy on the track and in the bush, and Ali was always in the water.
Yeah.
But just a pure interest point. So school, high school. What happened through your formative high school years, Madeline? Obviously, you ended up the year 2000 representing Australia over. I think it was the year 2000.
No, it'd be a bit later than that.
2000, the Youth Games.
2004.
Yep,
yeah,
sorry.
World Juniors.
So take us through that part of your development.
Well, I guess from my amazing 10-year-old performance. I had a couple of years off, and that was, I guess, for quite a few reasons. One being that there actually wasn't an age group for me once I went to high school. I think the youngest age was an under 13, and so I had a couple of years where obviously I was well and truly out of my depth, and that didn't really faze me. I just went to the school carnivals and made up the numbers. But it was when I was about 15 or so, I started to, I guess, enjoy running. I became a member of Kembla Joggers, which is the running club I still run for.
Yep.
And they had a little group that would meet on a Monday and a Wednesday in the afternoon down at the beach, and we'd just, have a bit of a session around there. And that's kind of where I started when I was about 15. So that'd be the end of 2003 or so.
Yep.
And I met Dave Chisholm sort of around that time, and he was my junior coach. And I don't think we really had a clear target of going to World Juniors. We just started to train, and it was the first time I'd had any sort of formal training or structured training. And I improved relatively quickly and ended up just scraping onto the World Junior team when I think I was 16. So I was quite young going into that team, and that was for the 1,500 metres.
That was for the 1,500, yep, got it.
Mm-hmm. So that was 2004.
Was that quite exciting for you, Madeline?
It was amazing. Yeah, I remember the trip being incredible. I don't remember much about the running. I think, when you're part of those teams, it's so much about the social environment, and there were incredible people on that team. Some who obviously have stayed in the sport. Sally Pearson was on my team. Zoe Buckman was as well. So there were a few of us who have continued to run and come and gone at different times. And then also just great friends who, you've stayed in contact with for other reasons. I remember loving being on the trip. I didn't run particularly well.
Doesn't matter, you had a good time.
No, I cried before the race. I was well and truly out of my depth, and I think I knew it. But
you cried, Madeline? Was that just feeling a bit overwhelmed?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really lucky to have the coach who was looking after me over there was Peter Fortune, who's become one of the mainstays in my athletic career and personal life as well. And I remember crying to Fort the day before, just telling him I was too scared to run. And I did go and run, but I wasn't too impressive.
And so off the back of that was your first Australian representation. Mm-hmm. What ensued after that, Madeline?
In 2005, I went to uni. And again, obviously, I was quite young. I moved out of home at 17 and went and lived in Sydney so I could pursue my studies up there. In 2005, I went to World Cross as a junior. Possibly one of my better runs, certainly my best run as a junior. I finished 16th over there. Had never run 6K before. I think the furthest I've ever run was 3K. So it was a little bit alarming, I guess, to get out there and double the distance, but I was happy with how I did.
Yep.
And then I don't think I did much else in 2005. 2006 was my final year on the track. And I guess the main achievements would have been another World Cross Country. I finished top 20 again. I finished 18th. And qualifying for Commonwealth Games, not being selected as I was very clearly the fourth athlete. And also qualifying for World Juniors in the 1,500 and the Steeple Chase.
Yeah, so that was a big year. And I mean, at the World Cross Country Championships, here's this girl from, Shell Harbour, Kiama, so to speak, New South Wales, obviously racing some of the Africans.
Yes.
What was going through your head as you pull up and you're like, oh, this is really, what were you thinking? Curious.
It was a really different experience the second time. The first time in 2005 when I went, I was actually the only Australian junior, male or female, who was selected.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite a unique experience for me, but an incredible one. I got to spend my time over with Georgie Clark, who obviously was, big idol for me at the time, a young star, and got to be part of a team with Benita and Craig Mottram and Sarah Jamieson and, incredible athletes. So that year, I think I don't remember being too worried. I just thought, gosh, 6K. I was probably more worried about the distance than the competition.
What was your longest here cross country, right? 6K.
It was. I remember one of the managers on the team saying to me, "What do you run for a 5K?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I've never run one before." And he looked at me very startled, and I don't think he said much else to me until after my race. But
wow.
Yeah, I certainly performed better than I could have expected. The second year, I think I was actually quite disappointed disappointed with my run. Obviously, when you have a chance to do something a second time, you hope you'll do it better. And on paper, I guess my performance wasn't quite as good, but in practice, it was a good race, and obviously, I'm still quite proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just out of without having the chronology in front of me, the years that you're on the team, they weren't the years, or were they the years that Benita took out the victory? Benita's been a previous guest.
No, I also
earlier.
Should know this. I think it was yes. I think it was about 2 years, 2 or 3 years earlier.
Rings a vague bell. So I just thought that might have been an amazing experience if you're on the team as a junior watching that happen.
Oh, yeah. I think the women, it was when they used to have a short course and a long course. And I think one of the years I was there, the Australian women won a medal as a team in the short course. So that was quite incredible as well.
Yeah.
They certainly did very well anyway.
Right. So, Madeline, this is bringing up this sort of phase one of your running life where you've gone from, bushy-eyed junior, winning, at age of 10, going to high school, continuing some good success, representation levels. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that you just missed selection for the Com Games for Delhi, right? 2010.
No, Melbourne.
Sorry, 2006. Of course, I just fast-forwarded 4 years. So just missed really more or less hometown, kind of not, but you know what I mean, hometown Commonwealth Games at a very tender age. You were still only, what was your chronological
I think
age?
I was 18.
So, 18.
18, 19, yeah.
And fourth athlete across the line, you just missed it. How did you deal with that disappointment at such a young age?
I think, in all honesty, I probably knew I was the fourth athlete going into the season. The concept of trying to qualify for Com Games was something that, obviously a lot of athletes came up with as soon as we knew it was a home games. And for me, it was around the end of 2005 when I'd had quite a good cross country, obviously overseas, that we started to think, all right, it'd be a shame to not give something a crack. And the concept of the Steeple Chase came up. I'd never done a Steeple Chase, never really had an interest in the Steeple Chase. It was a new event for women, and it was a time I think we thought was attainable for me without having to make too many changes to training. As a junior, I had a very low mileage, and Dave, I would say, was equally interested in my education as he was in my running.
Yep.
And that was something he was really, focused on when I was at high school and also when I went to uni. So we sort of looked at what I could possibly, what target could I reach without risking injury. And the one we came up with was the Steeple Chase. And I did get the time, so we weren't totally off, but unfortunately there were three really incredible runners at the time. We had Mel Rollinson, Donna McFarlane and Vic Mitchell all running, around 9:30, which up until last year we haven't really replicated that again.
Yep.
And I ran 9:54 or so, which was a great time for a junior, but a long way off where they were. So I don't remember being really disappointed.
Okay. Yep.
I had World Cross and World Juniors to focus on that year, so it was a fun ride to be on.
Yeah, no, I've got it. So that puts me more in perspective. And you mentioned that you're a low mileage junior runner. That was, I presume, just strategy from your coach at the time, Dave. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we really focused on the 1500. I never, or 800 and 1500. I ran a handful of 3K flats, and that was simply for the purpose of qualifying for World Cross. And then, I ran, I think, 2 steeple chases. So I was very much a low mileage, middle distance runner. And I guess we had no real reason to increase things. We assumed my career would be long, and I'd have plenty of time to up the mileage as I went along.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, hasn't it turned out to be a great seed that was sown? Because however, before we get to the current state, you fell away from the sport for a period. You'd started uni and it was pharmacy. And out of interest, Madeline, what was the attraction about studying pharmacy at uni?
I'll give you a bit of background on my family. My father is a doctor, my mother is a nurse, and both my siblings are pharmacists.
So you had no choice.
So it sounds that way. I did have a choice, but I was certainly influenced by my surroundings.
Yeah.
I was really tossing up between pharmacy and physio, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it was something that it's always a difficult decision. How does a 17-year-old make a choice in a career that's supposedly going to be the one they love for the rest of their life? I guess I chose pharmacy because we were a bit more familiar with it. Obviously, my siblings had gone through, or my brother was 1 year ahead of me.
Yep.
And, we had a little bit more of a clear understanding of the requirements and what it would lead to, and I guess the opportunities afterwards. Didn't love my first year, actually enjoyed the last few years.
Okay. So, and you graduated, what year was that?
I finished in 2008.
Okay, so right, so that was to come in 2008. And what sort of doctor is your father, Madeline? What is?
He's a psychiatrist.
So he's a psychiatrist. So you had no choice whether you say you did or didn't. No,
he might have been working on me from a young age. I'll never know.
No, I'm joking. So Madeline, so uni ended 2008, but before university ceased for you, you were juggling obviously uni and your running aspirations. From my knowledge, you hit injury, and that was in some way a catalyst for what ended up being a 7/8 year pause out of the sport. So are you happy to take us, listeners, myself, through what happened in that phase of your career?
Absolutely. Your summary is bang on. I missed qualification for Com Games, obviously, went to World Cross, was really happy with that, and came back and was starting to prep a little bit to head off to World Juniors for the Steeple and the 1500. All this time I was living in Sydney on campus. My coach, Dave, was still in Wollongong. I was really lucky to be able to join in with the Sydney Uni Athletics group, Dean Gleeson and a lot of great athletes around there, but obviously my sessions were a little bit different. I think things were going along quite well, and I developed a little bit of a sore knee, which ended up being a starting symptom of ITB syndrome.
Yep.
Which is obviously not in any way a career-ending issue, but it was quite literally the first niggle of any type I'd had in my life, and so it did kind of shock me a little bit. And I think I had a few weeks, of no running or modified running, and a lot of treatment at that time.
Yep.
It was around May, and I think World Juniors is around July. And after I'd missed about a month of training, or of training to the quality I wanted, I started to not really want to go to World Juniors.
Oh, wow.
In part because I guess I felt I'd already been and made up the numbers. And so I didn't sort of seek that out of the trip. I really wanted to go and perform well. And I think the Steeple Chase, I was ranked in the top few, and even the 1500, I was, well and truly should have made the final and run quite well. So I remember starting to not really want to go. Got the call from the physio and the medical team that, they certainly didn't think I'd be able to go, and I withdrew from the team. And I think my first, or the emotion I remember feeling, was not really of disappointment. It was a bit more of relief. And that's obviously not a great sign.
Yeah.
I think there'd been a long year. There'd been so many highs, obviously, with the Com Games. And to be fair, it wasn't really much of a low missing out. Just the experience of being considered in the mix was wonderful for me. But by the time World Juniors came around, I just wanted to have a break. And that's really what I thought it would be. I thought, all right, I'm out of the team. I'll just enjoy a month off and, get to be a part of college life and be a normal uni student, and then I'll come out and have a great cross country, and off I'll go again. And the longer the time away from running took, the more I started to find other things to fill my day.
Yep.
And by the time, I suppose, I was really able to start running, and I mean proper running, not 3 minutes on, 1 minute walk and that sort of rehab stuff, but by the time I was really back to running, it had started to feel like a burden. It wasn't something I looked forward to. I felt like I was missing out on going out with my friends or, whatever everyone else was doing. And it was the first time, I guess, that I'd stopped finding the joy in it.
And this was after the initial injury symptoms started, Madeline. How many months are we talking? Half a year, a year, 2 months?
No, not quite that long. Yeah, probably 3-4 months, I guess.
Yep, so it's not a massive amount of time.
No, not at all. And I was back running and symptom-free. I guess obviously not feeling, in particularly wonderful shape or anything like that. But, I was, doing a lot of running by myself, obviously, with my group back in Wollongong. And I was in Sydney, and I stopped really enjoying it. So I did persevere for a little while and thought, maybe it'll come back. And after a few months of that, I started to think, why am I doing something that I'm not enjoying? I made the decision that it wasn't bringing me what I wanted it to bring me anymore. And, I was happy with what I'd achieved. I'd been a great junior runner, and I didn't really have any regrets with that. And, I happily called my retirement, and it was quite literally calling my retirement. I, contacted Sydney Uni, where I was on scholarship, and told them I was no longer running. Wow. Months before I'd signed a shoe contract. And the agent who was dealing with that had to follow that up for me. It was a very definite decision.
Wow. So Madeline, you said you felt like running hadn't brought you what you were hoping for it to bring you. What were you hoping for it to bring you at that stage of your career? Because you're at this stage in years, you're
probably 19, 20.
So 19, 20, yep, so fresh in years. Yep.
I think it was just, my memories of running when I was 17, 18 and, in Wollongong with some great friends. I used to train with Lachlan Chisholm, who ran 3:37. He was the son of my coach for the 1500, and Jared Poppett was one of my training partners, and he was just a local runner and one of my best friends. So, every few days I got to meet up with my closest friends and have fun, and I loved it. And I think after the injury, I guess I'd separated myself from a lot of people, obviously because of geography.
Yep.
And I hadn't quite, found the right group in Sydney. I still wanted to be coached by Dave. So it felt a little bit more lonely. And I guess, I wasn't really sure where the next target was or whether I could still get to that next target. It wasn't the thing I woke up, excited to do anymore.
Yeah, so the love kind of just, dried up, so to speak. And I imagine, the university, potentially your agent, the shoe company, your parents, were people sort of not wanting you to do anything that you didn't want to do, but were they must have been able to see the potential, the talent, potentially even your coach at the time, and were people trying to woo you back, or were you just very resolute, this is it, and I've got no real... Did you have regrets? What about those things?
I definitely had moments of regret, and I think it was more a sense of guilt that I had a talent that I wasn't following up and that I wasn't using or exploring. In terms of my support, to be entirely honest, everyone was happy with my decision. I didn't go through school or start uni, with a family who expected me to have a career in sport. Sport was not a career; it was a hobby.
Yeah.
And, we did briefly, when I was in year 12, look at, colleges overseas for running, and we chose not to go because of my career and because of educational opportunities. We thought, the education I'd get in Australia was superior, which I still believe is the case. So, me stopping running was really me stopping a hobby.
Yeah, okay.
And, so it was something that, I don't think too many people were distraught about.
Yeah, sure. And for listeners, the reason I'm digging around the edges here, and Madeline, thank you for allowing me to prod, is because this story takes an amazing turn, and we're going to about to go there. But Madeline, just before we jump off it, you mentioned there's something that just grabbed me. You had a sense of guilt, when I asked you if you had any regrets. Where do you think that sense of guilt came from?
Yeah, I think I knew I was a relatively gifted runner, and I think every time I would see a race result in the next few years, really, where someone who I'd always at least performed as well as or better or whatever I'd been competitive with had gone on and continued to push and challenge themselves. When I'd see those results, I'd have that moment of, oh gosh, I should have done that. A little bit of I was given. Biology gave me something that I haven't really used to its potential. But, I didn't sort of wallow over those years. I certainly, explored other things. And through my junior years, I was never someone who went through school with one talent of being running. I would say through high school I was far more interested in music. I played the piano. I'd wake up at 5:30 and play on the piano for hours before I went to school.
Wow.
That was my real love through school.
Wow.
Running sort of, came along in those next few years around that 17, 18-year-old mark.
So you never really grew up aspiring to be a professional athlete or an Olympian?
No. Well, I didn't really know I obviously knew what an Olympian was, but to be a professional runner was not something I was really aware of. I obviously knew who Benita Johnson was, and I knew who Craig was, and I knew these things, but it wasn't something that, I saw was a possibility or a true career path. I guess I thought it was a fleeting thing that you'd do for a year or two, and then you go and grow up and be a real person.
Wow, amazing! You didn't have that as an aspiration. So I just think it's
I'm sure I had moments of it, but I didn't grow up with a Olympic ring stuck to my wall, dreaming of going. I loved watching the Olympics. Certainly, 2000, I watched. Every Australian did. In my time between career number 1 and career number 2, I couldn't say I watched a whole lot of the Olympics. I did watch a few things. But sport wasn't something that was, a massive part of my upbringing or my family.
Got it. And so let's then jump to 2013. Now, Madeline, so you have been out of the sport of running, your hobby, your very gifted hobby, really from 2006 through to 2013, the summer of 2013. So we're now 2017, so we're talking about 4 years ago, or an Olympic cycle, if you like.
Yes, nearly, yeah.
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, we're just in the summer of 16, really, so in 3 years.
You're about right.
It gets confusing, but around about, let's just say 3 to 4 years down the track from when you return to the sport, I've read almost conflicting type of stories around how you got going again. So I'd love to hear from your point of view, how this return happened. Can you take us through what on earth, possessed you is not the right word, but what on earth led you to put your shoes back on?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there are a couple of different versions. I'll correct it. I'll set it straight.
Please.
I was living in Adelaide in 2013, or I'd been there since 2011 with my now husband. And I had been working as a pharmacist, living in Adelaide, but working as a pharmacist in the Barossa, which is nearly an hour drive from Adelaide. And pharmacy hours are not your standard 9 to 5. They're sort of an 8:30 to 6:30 type of day. And I was getting in the car early, obviously, heading up there and coming back. And after a few months of doing that, or possibly even a year of doing that, I remember saying to Chris, gosh, I really feel like all I do is work or think about going to work or be at work, and I really want to have something other than that. And I started to get up in the morning and just go for a half an hour walk, and that was my fresh air for the day. And the walk, I guess, started to progress to a minute jog, minute walk, minute jog, minute walk. And I actually have a training log of this in one of my old phones where, I'd go for a 5-minute jog and then walk, and I'd come back and tell Chris how great it was. And I ran for a whole 20 minutes, but it wasn't all together. But, it was 20 minutes, and I thought it was great. I had no target whatsoever. It was just, getting a bit fit and being able to run for half an hour. And I sort of continued with that, I suppose, for a few months, and we ended up heading off to West Africa for a few months just for a holiday. And when I came back from that in early 2013, I decided to set a little bit of a target. And there was a local race in Adelaide coming up, just a 10K fun run, which I'm not sure still exists. And I remember saying to Chris, who used to be a runner back in his day, I think I might run that. I've never run a 10K. It'd be a new challenge. I won't compare myself to how I used to be because I've never done one before. And he was, very supportive and encouraging, and lined up for the race. Was really nervous. I'm not sure I'd run 10K in training, let alone an attempt at a race. And I ran the race in 40 minutes and 30 seconds or thereabouts. I was so proud of myself. I thought it was absolutely incredible. I did see Chris at about the 8K mark, and he's got a great picture of me smiling at him. And I remember saying, "This is really easy." And he said, "That's because you're jogging. Could you try a little harder?" But again, it was that fear of the distance. But anyway, I finished with just over 40 minutes, and couldn't believe that I'd nearly broken 40 and, decided pretty quickly to set a new target of breaking 40 minutes.
Wow.
And it has sort of progressed from there.
And so was Chris, obviously, at this stage you guys were married, correct me if I'm wrong?
We weren't at that stage, no.
Sorry, not at that stage. Sorry, I've fast forwarded the clock there. So, but was Chris aware of your background with your representative duties?
Yeah, Chris was aware that I was a good junior runner. I don't think he ever took it too seriously. I guess there's a lot of, 16, 17-year-old runners who perform quite well as a result of really intense training. And, just because you're a good 16-year-old runner does not mean anything when you grow up and you're running against other people who are also training hard. So he certainly knew I'd done things when I was young, but I don't think he held great expectations for my athletic career.
So at that point,
changed. But
neither of you had any idea what was to come.
No, definitely not. So we after that run, we went and met up with Adam Diddick, who was my coach up until the Olympics. And Chris had run with Adam a few years prior in their running group, and I said to Adam, look, I'd love to join in, but I don't want this to be called a comeback. I don't want a program written. I don't want you to follow me up if I don't turn up at training. I just want to turn up and do what the others do. Don't you dare write me a program. I was incredibly incredibly insistent.
Where did all that come from? Were you just where did that come? Was that your genuine heart, or were you just a bit fearful?
No, it was my genuine heart. I'd had a few moments, in the 8 years off running where I'd, maybe turned up to a local running group and just wanted to join in, and anyone who knew anything about my junior running had, straight away assumed it was a comeback, and I guess I didn't have the chance to really enjoy it the way I would have liked. And I think setting these rules so early with Adam made it pretty clear that I wouldn't be coming the next week if he started expecting too much of me.
So, and obviously Adam gave you grace, and you he nurtured you well, or denurtured you, if there's such a word.
Yes,
didn't nurture you, and you just you enjoyed that approach. So you find your fitness again, and then how do you fine-tune yourself to end up, representing Australia at the 2014 Com Games? What's that period like?
It all happened pretty quickly. From that 40-minute race, I started joining Adam's group, I think, twice a week, and just doing my own things on the other days. And within a few months, ran about 34 minutes for the 10K.
Within a few months, Madeline?
Yes.
Wow. So that's
maybe less than 2 months, 6 weeks or so.
Wow.
So that was a really monumental moment. I remember calling, Chris and my old coach Dave and Adam and everyone, and just being blown away that, I could be within 2 minutes of the winner of these races. And again, I thought that was great. I didn't, plan to go and run 32 minutes. But it wasn't long after that, Chris and I actually moved back to New South Wales. And it wasn't, a few weeks after that, I think I was out for a walk one day, and I started to think about track season. Adam had, asked me, was I planning to race? And originally I'd said no. And I guess that was simply because it was so measurable and so comparable to my junior career.
Yep.
And, doing road races of 10K had no connection to what I used to be.
Interesting.
And then I just started to think more and more about it and asked myself, what was the fear and what was it that was holding me back? Obviously, I was enjoying running. And I just decided that, I was willing to take the risk, and sure, maybe I wouldn't be that great at it, but, I'd regret more not giving it a crack. And so we made the decision in about October 2013 to target the Commonwealth Games.
And so that was October 2013, and flip over to the new calendar year of 2014, and you're off to Delhi. To Glasgow. Sorry, I missed it. Yes, sorry.
You love Delhi.
Yeah, no, off to Glasgow to run at the Com Games. So, getting your selection? What was that qualifier like? Can you remember it?
It was incredible. My first race back on the track, I think, was a low-key 1500 just at an interclub, but my first big big event was a Steeple Chase at Hunter Track Classic. I won the race in 10 minutes and 3 seconds, which was about a second off the qualifier for Com Games. Possibly one of my favourite moments still. We were all just so excited that, you know, the concept of trying to qualify was realistic.
Wow.
So that was the first one. I don't think I ran another Steeple Chase until Nationals, and I did get the qualifier. And then, it was all steam ahead. I also did get a qualifier for the 5K, which I'd never run until that year. But I only ran the Steeple Chase at Com Games.
At the Com Games. And at the Com Games, you finished a remarkable 4th, just missing the podium.
Yes. Yeah, I actually watched that race for the first time ever a week ago. I'd never been able to find footage of it, and one of my good friends sent me a video of my races in Rio as well. But on that DVD was my Com Games race, so I have good memories of it now. But it was incredible. I went into the race knowing that, you know, the 3 Kenyans were incredible, but certainly believing I could be that next person. And, you know, if you can be 4th, you might as well try to be 3rd.
Yep.
I was pretty aggressive in the race. I think I got to the front, you know, quite a few times, but obviously wasn't strong enough physically or mentally really in the last lap to hold them off. But finishing 4th in a PB in Com Games, I think 6 months after I returned to the track was far above and beyond anything I could have dreamt of.
A handy hobby, I'd say. And so at that point, was there a bit of an Olympic flame really lit? You realised this must be a potential for you, or were you thinking that far ahead, or not even that far ahead after the Com Games in 2013?
When I had the goal of running at the Commonwealth Games, I didn't have any goal of running in the Olympics. I really just wanted to prove to myself that I could make a senior team. And so initially it really was just about qualifying. Then when I got there, it was about doing well. After the Commonwealth Games, of course, the Olympic dream sort of was lit. Yep. But through all of the comeback, I think the aspect that I was and am most proud of was that I sort of didn't do it the way that you're told you have to do it. I moved back to New South Wales, was working full-time as a pharmacist. I'd also enrolled in a master's degree in public health and was studying that as well. And I sort of kept all of those things up, not just till Com Games, through Beijing and up to Rio. Obviously, I finished my study. Yeah. But, I think when I had suggested I would like to start running, and certainly after Com Games when I said I want to go to Beijing and I want to go to Rio, certainly got plenty of messages that it's impossible to do and have a career and do it the way I did it. So I think that's something I am quite proud of, and I guess I like to show that there's more than one way to achieve.
Yeah, I mean that's just remarkable. So off the back of Com Games, we then you went off to Beijing World Championships and then over to qualifying for Rio. I want to thread this theme through of your work and completing your public health masters as well. But qualifying for Rio, that happened for you when? Rio 2016 Olympic Games.
I think I qualified for the 5K for Rio before I did the steeple. I qualified for the 5 in the States. I think one day after the qualifying period opened. So it actually opens, I think, May 1st, 2015. And I ran the 5K qualifier on May the 2nd.
Wow. So you're in quickly.
I was in very quickly. And then about a week or two later, I ran the Steeple Chase qualifier as well. So
all in relatively quick succession. So
yes.
You're bound for Rio, first Olympic Games, the runner that, I just found it fascinating, his story. So you, up until Rio, right through, were you more or less, because I saw some of your social media posts and I know you were working, but what extent were you working leading into Rio? And we'll talk about your Rio results in a moment, Madeline, they were remarkable, but how many hours?
Yeah, so leading into the Olympic trial, which was in early April, I had cut back my hours about a month before that to around 30, 35 maybe. Around sort of Com Games and Beijing, I was working upwards of 45 to 50 hours a week.
Yep.
But yeah, so I cut it back just before the qualifying. And then once I was there, I spent a lot of the time, after the Olympic trial, I spent a lot of time overseas. So obviously when I was over there, I wasn't working. But when I came back, I would just do a few shifts at one of my favourite pharmacies who were very accommodating for me, and they'd let me come and go a little bit. And I really enjoyed being there. So I'd say I really approached the Olympics for the last 3 months as an almost full-time athlete, largely because I was overseas.
Yeah, got it. So yeah, you're overseas and a bit more focused purely on the running. So Rio, what a debut Olympic Games, 5,000-metre PB, 15:04 in the obviously on the track there, and finishing in, I believe you were 10th in the final,
Yes,
Maddie.
I was.
And down the finish straight, from my recollection, with two of the previous guests on the podcast, Eloise and Genevieve, you girls were almost, you could throw a net around you all. And then the 3000-metre Steeple Chase, final in there as well, finishing 7th in another PB, 9:20:38. So 2 PBs, 2 Olympic finals. Tell me you weren't pinching yourself after this.
Yeah, certainly was. The Olympics were incredible. Obviously I look back on that 6 days as, the highlight of my running career. Throughout the time, once you go into the Olympics and you start one race, it's hard to sort of enjoy each race as it goes. You almost can't afford to. So I remember running the heat, and I'd approached the Olympics with a very unideal preparation. I was diagnosed with a stress reaction in my second metatarsal 3 weeks prior to the Games.
While you were overseas? That was when you were overseas?
Yes, while I was overseas. I'd just run a really big PB in the 1500, which was actually an Olympic qualifier too. And then went to run a steeple chase at the final race prior to the Olympics, and had a pain in my foot, and had a scan and was diagnosed with a stress reaction. So, yes, I was living in Loughborough in the UK, which is where I base when I'm over there.
Yep.
Spent a week there cross-training, and then headed into the holding camp in Florida with conflicting medical advice, and advice that I acknowledge I didn't listen to, but I'm pleased I didn't. I was advised not to run until the Olympic Games, and that was something I decided I was willing to risk. I was willing to risk a more serious injury to be able to line up, feeling confident that I was able to make the final. So I did take that risk, and I was fortunate, I guess, that it paid off. But me heading into the steeple chase was an unusual feeling. I was nervous because it was the Olympic Games, but I was also, quite nervous because I knew I hadn't put together the weeks I'd wanted in the, leading into it.
Yep.
I actually ran a really scrappy race. I watched it. Like I said last week, and it wasn't a great race. I was almost, lucky to get through that one. But I think that's what happens at the Olympics, and it's particularly when it's your first Olympics, it's quite scary. So you hope you'll just do well enough in the heat to have another chance. And I was fortunate to do just well enough to get there. By the time I lined up for the final, no nerves were there anymore. I'd done what I came to do, which was, make the final, and anything else from there was a bonus. And I just went out and ran and enjoyed the experience.
And did you have any pain in your foot after the heat, Madeline?
No, I didn't. Throughout the time in the village, I do remember walking around or even going for an easy jog and feeling a little bit of pain. But I didn't do a whole lot of running other than the races. We did the bare minimum. There was an Ultra G in the village that you could use.
Yep.
So I offloaded when I could, and I'd certainly done that in the weeks leading in too. So
what percentage, just out of interest, were you sort of deload into, Madeline?
80%.
Yeah, okay. And doing some speed work and leg turnover stuff in there? Really.
I did. The sessions that I did were what I did on land, so I kept my sessions on land. It was just the filler jogs that I was doing on the Ultra G.
Okay.
So I was quite lucky. I didn't really feel much, and to be honest, I've not had much trouble with it. Well, I haven't had any trouble with it since. So I got through that one unscathed.
Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, your 5,000 metres, and you got through the final, as you say, unscathed. You lined up for the 5,000 metres heats, and then into the final. And I mean, that was just from Aussie sitting at home watching on the TV. That was a remarkable final, seeing the three girls go around and do so well. What was going through your head at the start of the 5,000 metres? I mean, to you, it must have felt like a bit of a bonus. Like, well, here I am for another final.
It's quite funny because I in many ways I prefer the 5K, but certainly going into the Olympics, my ranking was higher in the Steeple Chase. Without having the Steeple Chase, if I'd just gone to the Olympics for the 5K, I certainly expected to be in the final, but obviously having such a quick turnaround from the Steeple Chase to the 5K, yes, making the final was absolutely a bonus. To be honest, by the time the 5K final came around, I was mentally tired. It was a long week, and something I'd really never experienced before. I don't have experience doing heat and finals. The only scenario I have in the last decade was at World Champs in 2015, and I didn't get through the heats. So. It was quite unfamiliar for me to have to put on my uniform 4 times in 6 days and, eat the right meal before the race and head out to the track. And in all fairness, I was actually a little bit exhausted by the time the race came around. I wish there was a day earlier. Yeah. But obviously it's the Olympics and you go out there, and once you get there, you're incredibly excited. So I remember standing on the start line a little bit in a daze. It took me a few laps really to wake up, and I remember I think about a mile to go, I was a little bit detached and not really focusing on what was going on. And I remember looking up around the stands and saying to myself, Mads, this could be the last time you run in an Olympics. Make it count. You don't see much of it on the camera because we're a long way from the winner, but I put in a pretty good last mile, and I certainly threw myself over the line and achieved more than I could have expected.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Aussies did see you, Madeline. We did see you, so and we saw the empty in the tank in that one for sure. I mean, is there this Olympic story before we move off Rio? Any cool little stories or incidents over there?
I don't know if it's a cool one, but it's probably the one that really stands out for me. Those weeks leading in were pretty emotional, and trying to stay positive. You can pretend really well, but it's very hard to truly feel that when there's so much doubt. And I think my absolute favourite moment from the Olympics was the moment I found my husband after I came out of the tunnel from the heat of the Steeple Chase and gave him a hug, and every emotion came out. But I think that was really what stood out was, my goodness, I did it. And like I said, everything from there was, incredible and an absolute bonus, and, everything I had worked hard for and what I was able to do in those next 3 races was a result of the hard work I'd put in, prior to those 3 weeks beforehand. Yeah. But yeah, just having the chance to go a second time is quite incredible, and not something, other people get to do. Yeah. To get to do it 4 times was, like I said, a little bit exhausting, but pretty special.
You made the most of it. And I mean, this is Chris, your husband, who,
yes.
A few years earlier, you were both celebrating
40 minutes.
40-minute 10K. So,
that's right.
And here you are a few years later at Olympic final, the big stage. Madeline, your Kembla running partners and group must have been excited. I know certainly your local pharmacy back in Australia was, but what were the Kembla runners? What was their reactions? They must just love you.
That's probably the best thing about going to the Olympics. Isn't really about running around. It's sort of knowing who's at home, supporting you and wishing you well. And I guess the advantage of having moved all around Australia and having so many different lives in my last 29 years is that I had lots of different people. So Kembla joggers were so excited. My pharmacy had banners everywhere. I came back and there were photos of me in my little 2-piece all around the shop, which was a little bit confronting. And then I had patients from Tasmania and South Australia and all the places I'd worked who had no idea I was a runner, because I hadn't been a runner when I'd been there. Who at some point had turned on the TV and noticed that was their pharmacist running around. So some of the messages I got from patients, and a few in particular who were really, really special to me, and that I feel I was a big part of their life. The words they said to me afterwards were pretty incredible. So I think that's really the highlight. That's what you really run for, is to have those beautiful comments from people who you've somehow made a difference to.
Isn't it terrific? Well, Madeline, let's shift gears now to the performance round. So some quick fire questions here, and this is a workout for you. You ready?
Okay.
Favourite training session?
I would normally have said 1K reps. I'm going to say 1 mile reps because I now work in miles. I have a British coach who I originally refused to talk in miles, and now I seem to have transitioned. So I've been doing 1 mile reps with 60 seconds recovery, and I really quite enjoy them. There's a good group here in Melbourne. The Wolfpack do some mile reps on a Saturday, and I join in with them. Nice.
How many reps are we talking about?
Anywhere between 4 and 6.
Okay, so it's solid. Most disliked session, Madeline?
People may understand this if they've ever watched me do a Steeple Chase. Any session that involves hurdles. I have failed to really master that part of the event. It's a work in progress. I've said that for a few years, but I can only improve if I keep working on it. I don't do a lot of training over hurdles, which is evident. But when I do, I don't enjoy it. Anything to do with hurdles.
Anything to do with hurdles. Favourite pre-race meal?
If it's a morning race, probably crumpets with honey and banana.
Go the crumpets.
Yeah, but you can't get those overseas, or not the same. They're not the same. A nighttime race would be something with rice and fish and veggies, maybe sushi or something. Sushi.
Can you remember what you ate in Rio?
Yes. In Rio, we had morning races 3 of the days. So I was, stockpiling cereal and yogurt and fruit and whatnot. It was a very unglamorous breakfast that was kind of made in the dark as I got dressed. Other than that, pretty much every dinner I would have something that I think was pad thai or vaguely similar, very bland pad thai with salmon.
Right. So you didn't go and obviously you didn't. There was a few athletes that have told me they had all sorts of different food choices. I was going to say join Ryan Gregson at the Nike Hospitality, but certainly with your long-standing partner Adidas, you were nowhere near that place. Exactly.
The food was absolutely satisfactory. It was all, I think it was athlete friendly, which unfortunately meant salt-free and oil-free. I would have definitely taken the salt and the oil.
Yeah, wow. So bedtime and morning time, what's your routine normally like, Madeline?
Oh, it's changed a little bit now that I'm not really working. Previously, I'd say 5:30 morning. Now I'd say 6:30. Bedtime around 10:30.
So 10:30, great. And athlete that you most admire, Madeline, who is it and why?
Probably got 2.
Yep.
Danny Samuels and Catherine Mitchell. 2 of our throwers. Danny finished 4th at the Olympics and Catherine was 6th. Why do I admire them? I admire them obviously because of their performance and consistent performance. They've both been top 10 in the world Danny for an incredibly long time and Catherine for a long time too.
Yep.
But mainly I admire them because they're that incredible and they are incredible people. They're both so humble, both so... humble, grateful, warm, beautiful girls. They're the 2 I would pick.
Well said. Toughest competitor you've ever raced, Madeline, and why?
Toughest competitor. This is going to be one that's only a new competitor for me, really. I've only come across her in the last couple of races. But I really wanted to beat her and I didn't, so that's why she comes to mind. Her name's Caroline Grovdale. She's a European. I've gone blank. I think she's Norwegian, but I'm probably wrong with that actually. But basically she's probably the leading European distance runner at the moment in the 5K and the 10K, and she finished just in front of me in Rio in the 5K and just in front of me in Brussels at the Diamond League final. So I've seen a lot of her backside and I'd love to finish in front of her next time.
You'd like to switch the order.
I would love to.
Is there a mantra, Madeline, that you use when you race? Like, is there a regular, mantra, a bit of self-talk that you have, something that you say to yourself?
There's not really. I've sort of something I'm actually I'd love to start to move towards. I have a tendency to get a little bit distracted in races. Anything over 1500, to be honest, I still kind of switch off at some point. Rhythm is one that I've really tried to focus on, relax and rhythm. But I don't have any real cool catchphrase as yet. But hopefully I'll have one soon.
Watch this space. Madeline, best recovery tip. Have you got a favourite recovery tip?
I do. Ideally, I'd be at home and I'd get a massage from my husband, Chris, with my favourite cream, Physio cream, which you may or may not use as a physio.
Madeline, we certainly do. I have my hands and elbows bathed in it 24/7,
yes.
12/7.
Yeah, well, if when I'm home, we go through that very, very quickly. When I'm away, I'm not as good with self-massage, so I don't use it quite at the same rate, but definitely a massage. I'd love to say ice bath, but I'm such a chicken, I hardly ever get into an ice bath. And good food. Food straight away is something that I've probably only gotten onto in the last 6 months or so, but I certainly think it's important to refuel straight away.
What do you refuel with, Madeline? You got a routine?
I've been using Science in Sport products, so I've got just a protein powder that I take straight away, and it's actually quite delicious, so it's not too bad. I always thought they'd taste awful, but this one tastes fantastic. So I have that straight away, and then I, whatever time of the day it was, I guess, brunch is my favourite thing. I live in Melbourne, so that's pretty much all you do, and that's my favourite thing about Melbourne is to have brunch. So any variation, I normally pick the sweeter option.
You do like desserts, don't you? I see them feature regularly on your social.
I do, but I actually think my favourite thing would be a cheese platter. So maybe my taste buds are changing. I do still love dessert, but I think cheese may be the front runner now.
Right. Well, as you know, your taste buds do mature, right? So it could be the change. Tell me, Madeline, what's on your bucket list, both personally and in sport?
Bucket list. Okay, I'll start with personally. We're obsessed with getting a dog, so that would be probably my highest priority in life currently. We've got a little while to wait, but definitely want to get a dog or a few dogs.
What sort of dogs?
I guess, it changes. At the moment, it's a pug and a Labrador. But it's not really limited to two. We think that family will grow much bigger than our human family.
Okay.
Obviously, we would eventually like our human family to grow too, but we'll probably have more furry friends. I guess I'm also really eager to sort of explore my career post-running. I did do this Masters in Public Health, and I'm particularly interested in health promotion. I'm actually starting work a little bit with Hepatitis Victoria next week, just learning a little bit about their health promotion, sort of what they do in a public health sort of setting. So I'm really excited to do that. Other than that, I guess my area that I'd really love to explore is being involved in drugs of addiction and rehabilitation. So that would be where I would love to see my career go post-running.
Well, where's the interest in that for you, Madeline? Is that a lot of families are touched by some level of drug dependency that have affected relatives and different things? Nothing like that. This is just an interest that you've got.
No, I think growing up with a father, obviously having a lot of patients who had experiences with drugs, I suppose I had a little bit more of an understanding than most people would. But it's really through my own work experience. Most pharmacies I've worked at have had methadone programs or opioid replacement programs, and they've really, that area of pharmacy has been what I found most fulfilling. I think the people who work in the area are fascinating. I think the clients are incredible, and I'm really lucky to have had some great interactions with people over the years, and have the chance to feel like I really was a big part of their recovery, and several I keep in contact with and love to hear of their progress. So I think it's just a really interesting area. I think the drugs are interesting, the pharmacology of it, and I think the human nature of it's fascinating.
Madeline, many people I guess wonder how you've been able to juggle the world of professional work as a pharmacist and then also a burgeoning international running career. And yet it seems, odd that you would be able to juggle both seemingly extremely well, obviously on the running front, which is so visible to everyone, and I'm sure your standards with your professional work aren't any less. Madeline, what's the driving force in trying to run parallel careers leading into, such a big event like last year's Rio Olympic Games? I mean, is it just that you're a sucker for lots of hard work, or because they're not too easy career paths, or what is it that you think drove you to, or has driven you thus far to want to do the parallel journeys, Madeline?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was a tricky couple of years. I think it all sort of happened in a way because the running happened by mistake, which sounds really silly, but it truly did. When I started running, it was recreational, and then I had a goal of the Commonwealth Games, which is obviously a difficult goal to have and a difficult team to make, but was something that I thought I could achieve by continuing to work. And then I came fourth at Commonwealth Games, and I thought, okay, I know that's a good performance, but half the world's not there. Not really confident enough yet to really put myself into the sport and say I am an athlete. So I continued to work, in part because financially it was worth my while, but also I'd never really called myself an athlete until after Rio. And I guess I continued that, and I went to World Champs. I had some great races overseas before World Champs, but then when I got to World Champs, I didn't make the final. I missed the final in both the Steeple Chase and the 5K by one spot. So again, I sort of went away from that. Yeah, okay, I did a good job, but I'm still not quite to the level I want to be. And, am I willing and ready to drop this other part of my identity to become an athlete when I still don't really feel like I'm quite there? And I guess that carried right through to Rio.
Wow, Madeline, I'm amazed. I mean, and listeners, I'm sure listening in would be like, how could someone that performs so well not identify with themselves as an athlete? You've had a Commonwealth Games representation, Australian Championship, World Juniors, incredible bio. Was it a lack of confidence and belief at the core?
Look, I guess there must have been some element to that, but I think a big part of it was simply that I expect a lot from myself. And when, at the end of 2014 and the end of 2015, when I sort of sat down and, was obviously really proud of what I had achieved, it's not that I didn't realise I was improving, but I could still see a really big gap between the real top girls and where I was at. So I think it was simply that I wasn't quite at the level that I expected of myself to really say that's what I am, that's what I'm good at. And I'm not really sure. I didn't have an exact benchmark of, when you run this time or you finish this place. It wasn't a preempted thing of all of a sudden I'd become an athlete. Yeah. Or even, it wasn't you become an Olympian and you're a superstar. I certainly didn't have that at all. I just expected myself to be on the team. It wasn't, something that I really gave myself an opportunity of not being there once I set that target. I assumed I'd be there. So, I guess I, took a little while to take that tag for myself.
Well, if it takes going to Olympic Games to be able to call yourself an athlete, so be it. I think it's an interesting insight. And I think we all feel like this in some ways, where the world will identify us within a certain way or see us in certain ways in our abilities or capabilities. And yet, for ourselves, it's so often that we don't really resonate with that. We don't see ourselves so others see ourselves. And I think it's a powerful principle. So, Madeline, as an amazing athlete that so many people follow and respect and admire, I imagine that there seems to be now, from what you've described, a bit of a shift in what might be your approach going forwards to what we hope is Tokyo 2020. You mentioned leading to Rio, and then off the back of Rio, you've had a few months where you haven't been running parallel careers. So what are you planning to do differently leading into into Tokyo, Madeline?
Yeah, I'm planning to do pretty much everything a bit differently, which obviously has a few risks initially until you get used to all the changes. But I think after Rio, after the whole week was over, throughout the week I didn't have any moment where I let myself enjoy that I'd come 7th and I'd made the final, because in a way, once you switch off, it's really hard to switch back on. So it wasn't really until I was back in Europe doing a few more races that I, sat down and let myself reflect on it. And I guess I realised how proud I was, not just to go to the Olympics while doing everything else. I was proud of that, but I came 7th at the Olympics by not committing wholly to it. I'm proud of that, but I don't want that to be my running career. I don't want to be the girl who was very good, but maybe could have been better if she really, focused on that properly. So I think that sort of acknowledging that that's how I felt, and that, I really did want to give this a proper crack, was the first step. But really over the next few years, I have lots of very, very big goals. I really do believe I can achieve them. Some of them are, terrifying on paper, and that's kind of the point of a goal, I guess. But, I do think I have the ability to get there if I work my butt off. And I think, at the end of my running, I would really love to say just that I gave it everything, and whatever it is that I can achieve, that was truly the best I could be. Maybe I'll never get faster, maybe I'll never finish better than 7th at the Olympics. But I'd love to have the chance to go in 4 years' time in whatever event it ends up being. And, knowing that that's the best, that was me giving it a proper crack. Yeah.
Madeline, I just so resonate with that approach. I mean, that's in many ways the essence of this podcast. It's about helping people perform at their very physical best, not their 80% best or their 70% best, but discover what it is that their best output is, whatever the endeavour, whatever the sport, running or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, as much as to for the most of the time I've kept my cool in a race, at the back of my mind always is that thought of, I'm standing here with these girls who this is what they do. This is all they do. And, I might have worked a 12-hour shift the day before, which I've done plenty of times in Australia in the domestic season. And there's just that little bit of doubt of, am I tired from it? Am I really there? And sometimes that's, I guess, that little switch when the really tough part of a race comes in. I can't really say you've worked. This is everything you've done. Every single thing for the last however many years has gone towards this, because that hasn't been my story. And I'd love it to be my story, and see what that ends up with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be exciting to see what the 100% focused Madeline can do. Madeline, yeah. I must share. I mean, this I pulled out from something that you'd written, but this was what your description of your Rio experience was: to stand on the start line at the Olympics knowing that running had not been your sole focus challenged your confidence and self-belief. Walking away from the games with the 7th and 10th place as a part-time athlete changed that. When you say challenged your confidence and self-belief, can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of elements to it, but I guess in some ways, having something else, having a career at the same time, subconsciously gives you a little bit of a safety net, and not an excuse as such, but just, another thing of, okay, you weren't quite there, but, this isn't it. And it's something that, my parents have said to me plenty of times, and lots of people sort of in a comforting way of, okay, you didn't quite get everything out there, but, this is just something you do on the side. And you've got this, and you've got your study, and, you're so rounded, and obviously that's, really complimentary, and it's lovely. But I think to really get everything out of yourself, you almost need to not have that, to not be able to say, hey, I did this other thing yesterday. And I mean, the reality is, as much as I'm, stepping away from pharmacy a little bit over the next few years, I'm never going to be just a runner. I'm heavily involved with family. I can't wait to go and, line up some work with this hepatitis council and be involved in different sorts of ways. And I'd love to explore different avenues, in health, in other ways outside of pharmacy over the next few years. But, those decisions will be made around my running, as opposed to what I used to do, which was, hey, this is great for my career. My run can probably fit in at some point in the day. Yeah,
and I mean, it's a pharmacy term, but I think it applies to what you said. It's almost a safety net, isn't it? It's
yes,
the
it is a
pharmaceutical
pharmacy
safety
term.
net, but it's the safety net of, well, Yeah, that was me, and but I've got this over here. So, Madeline, I think I'm super excited to see what the next few years brings for you with that, that unilateral focus and extraction of your very best, running performances. I mean, I was amazed just off air when we shared around the fact that you've never been to a training camp or even trained at altitude. So,
no. Well, I in January obviously is the time in Australia that everyone heads to altitude, and a lot of groups, head to altitude at different points throughout the year as well. But for me, I always felt a little bit guilty asking my boss and bosses for a month off just to go to a mountain and train. So I never took it off. I have slept in an altitude tent at times, which is not it's not fantastic. If anyone has ever seen or heard an altitude tent or got to enjoy the heat and the sweatiness that comes with sleeping in an altitude tent, they'll realise it's far nicer, I'm sure, to be on a mountain somewhere. But that was kind of my compromise.
Wow. So, I mean, there's so much still left ahead of you. There's such a big runway, isn't there? So it's just
and I think there's a lot for me to learn, and I'm sure I'll have some hiccups along the way, and I guess that's the advantage of making a lot of changes at the end of an Olympic cycle. I've got 4 years to get things right, and this year really is a bit of a building year, and obviously working things out with my new coach and how things go there. Com Games obviously a big target, and then I've got plenty of years until Tokyo, so hopefully it's enough time.
Absolutely. There's a beautiful saying that said experience alone is a good teacher, but evaluated experience is a great teacher. So as you say, you've reviewed your Rio campaign, and now you'll put those learnings into your Tokyo campaign, and Madeline, we just watch on with great interest, fascination and encouragement. So thanks for sharing so openly about your Rio experience.
Thank you.
Madeline, if you could boil down everything you've learnt through your 2 phases of running, phase 1, phase 2, which you're currently in, what would be the one bit of advice you'd give to physical performers across the board? So not just runners, but anyone out there listening, which is the bulk of this audience of the program, trying to pursue their physical best performance. What would be Madeline Hills Nieheiner one tip?
Okay, phase 1 would simply be just to love running. As much as I obviously fell out of it, and that's why I stopped running, my memories of being a junior athlete are brilliant. The chance to be outdoors and be active with friends and like-minded people is incredible. So I think no matter what level of performance you achieve, it's an incredible thing to be a part of. And running's brilliant simply because of its simplicity. In my second career, I guess my message, and this would be a little bit more, I suppose, to people, taking it a bit more seriously, but would be to trust your process and to put faith in the people around you. I have come back into this running as an adult, and therefore, having much more of an understanding of how people work, and more of an understanding of the people that I want to surround myself with. Yeah. And, I'm really lucky that I've had an incredible team, manager, coach, training partners, medical team, and my family and friends, obviously, who, I have a lot of respect for as who they are as people, and also, obviously, their role in my sporting career. And sometimes those choices weren't the easy choice, but I took them because, it's important to me to have people around me that I have respect for as people. So I guess I would say just, have trust in the people around you, and even if they're not necessarily the one that everyone else is going to or following the trends, there are other ways to do it. Adam was an amazing coach for me, and I have moved on. But, we had a very unorthodox coaching situation. He lived in Adelaide, I lived in Wollongong, we made it work. I now have a coach in the UK. I live in Melbourne. We'll make it work. Yeah. We trusted that process, and we got the results we wanted. So, I guess my message is just find the right people around you, and anything really is possible. just follow that path.
Yeah, well said. Excellent advice. Madeline, a couple of listener questions that came through today before we went live, and I'll just, Lozzie07, Lozzie asks, would love to know how Maddie's so good at maintaining balance in running, training and life, and also how you found your love and passion again for the sport after the long break. So obviously we've covered the return, but any tips there on balance? Obviously, you know, people look at what you've achieved and, you know, wonder how do you do it all?
I honestly think you can fit so much more into the day than you think you can. You just have to make it a priority. I remember standing in the kitchen at my parents' house, around that time that I made the decision to try to go to Commonwealth Games in October 2013 and saying, Mum, Dad, this is my plan. And they're obviously very supportive, as all parents are, but I remember them saying to me, well, how on earth are you going to do that? I thought you had a career in this. I thought you just started a degree. And I said, I'll make it work. And there were certainly times that it was difficult. I only really ran once a day. I've only really started running twice a day now. But I'd run in the morning. I'd be up at 5:30. I knew I had to be out the door at 6. I'd go to work, and then the evenings were for my study for my degree, but you can make it work. I think you just have to prioritise and be flexible. Some days if, the run doesn't happen or the study doesn't happen or, whatever part of it is that you're not able to do, just to realise that it's not really, every single day that's important. It's just about putting together as many of those as you can. One run's not going to make a difference, but missing a lot is. So you do need to be, you need to prioritise. But if you want to do it enough, you can fit a lot in.
You mentioned your parents there. I must ask, what was the first thing, if you can recall, that your dad said to you after Rio, and your mum? Do you remember that?
Oh my parents are very, they're unique. The first thing they said, I remember them being, obviously ecstatic. My parents don't have a huge understanding of the sport, and I don't think they'd be annoyed at me for saying that. But, they have high expectations of me, certainly. So if I hadn't made the final, I'm sure, they would have been disappointed. But that was in part because I would have been disappointed.
Yeah.
I think... I don't think they really had an understanding of what it was until they got the feedback, from friends and family as well, who'd maybe watched me run and maybe heard some of the commentary or seen some reactions in the media and things like that. So, Mum and Dad were very excited to be in Rio. They had a great time. They actually didn't stay for my 5K. They were only there for my Steeple Chase, but that was my advice. I told them to go and travel, and I didn't know I'd run the 5, so I didn't want them to sort of be stuck in Rio any longer than they wanted to be. But, they were really, excited. And now that we're down in Melbourne, Mum and Dad don't have a huge part of my running, but they always take the opportunity to go on a holiday and come along to whatever the next race is. So, it's always nice to have them there.
Very nice, Mr. and Mrs. Heiner.
Yes.
And Katrina's asked here too, Madeline, interested in understanding how Madeline strengthens her mind prior to racing and during the longer endurance runs. Any insights there?
I think it's just a practice thing. The longer endurance runs are something that, for me are getting longer. The longest run I would have done before was 90 minutes, and the longest amount of volume in a session would have been just over 6K. That'll start to step up. I do plan eventually to sort of move towards the 10K. I'd really love to explore that, and obviously that means the runs get longer. Some days it's a drag. You just focus on the clock, but for the most part, I think, when you find that rhythm and you start to move along well, it's just about the process. It's one step in front of the other, and you can almost find yourself drifting off and not having to think about it too much. But I guess that's what I'd say. But, on the days that it's really difficult, that's when I really draw on, the coach or my husband who's by my side or training partners. And I hope that they'll snap me out of it and make me push on and complete the run.
Or the Swans near Albert Park.
Yes, exactly.
Now, Madeline, fun question. 3 people at dinner, living or present, or past, or I should say living or past. Who would be at that dinner table and why? 3 people.
3 people.
Yep.
All right. Number 1 would have to be my husband. Partly because he should be there because he's my husband, but secondly because he would make sure the wine pairing is very good. He's good with his wine, so the meal would be well matched.
Nice.
My second person would be probably someone who I would say was my idol growing up, or someone I certainly admired. Her name's Catherine Hamlin. She's a Australian obstetrician and gynecologist who works in Ethiopia and has been there for about 60 years. She's in her 90s now. Amazing person, and obviously her experiences would be pretty incredible. So I've always wanted to hear about what she's seen and the impact she's made.
Wow.
And to lighten the mood a bit more...
Sorry, Chris and Catherine.
Yeah. We went to a reconciliation comedy gala yesterday for Australia Day, and Will Anderson was there, and he is hilarious. So I would invite Will.
Well, what a fascinating table. And now, Madeline, as the guest of this week's episode, you are most welcome to issue listeners of the program a physical challenge for the week. So this can be extremely difficult. It can be entry level. What will Madeline Hills' physical challenge be? It can be anything. Could be 10 push-ups.
All right. I'm not entirely sure if this is actually challenging or if it's just challenging for me. I started to do Pilates a couple of weeks ago. I had a little bit of time off running with a niggle and just wanted to do some other things to kill the time. There's an exercise, you might know what it's called. It's on the Pilates Reformer, and you draw big circles with your feet. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, I know the one, yep.
Right, I find that really difficult. So basically, to the listeners, you're sort of lying on your back and you've got your feet strapped into straps. Yep. And they're sort of wide, and you try to draw circles, and it's, I guess, your hips and glutes are working. Is that right?
Correct, yep.
Yeah. And I don't draw circles. The instructor said to me, I don't know what sort of squiggle you're doing, but that is not a circle. So I haven't mastered that one yet. I try really hard, and I'm clearly not great at it. So that's my challenge. I don't know, for people to draw the circle with their foot like you're meant to.
To get on the reformer. And I must say, Madeline, you need to throw that one on social to issue it as a challenge so people can jump over and follow you and go, right, we've got to improve on Madeline's.
Yeah, I'll see. I might have to edit it a few times, but I'll give it a crack next time I'm near a reformer.
The perfect circles.
Yeah, it'll be edited and it'll be a short video.
Yeah. Madeline, speaking of social, where can listeners follow your journey? What are your social media handles? Listeners, we'll link this up in the show notes. Obviously, jump over to POGO Physio. But where can we find you, Madeline?
I have Instagram. My tag is Madeline Hills. You can pop that on the spelling, particularly of the middle name. Yep. I do have Twitter. I admit I really only retweet things. It's the same tag, Madeline Hills.
Yep. Great. So we'll link those up, listeners. And Madeline, I must say, you strike me as someone that's got an incredible abundance of gifts and skills, and also someone that's really wants to get the best out of your potential. And certainly your journey's inspiring. Anyone that's taken a break from sport, whether it's to come back competitively or to come back recreationally, I think most people somewhere through their life, go through that return in some capacity. So, Madeline, I just think your story's an absolute sensation, and I believe we've probably got years of good running ahead for you, hey? So hopefully we'll see you.
I certainly hope so.
2018 here on the Gold Coast for the Commonwealth Games.
Yes, that would be that would be fantastic.
That'll be wonderful. Well, Madeline, well done, and all the best for 2017 and onwards.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Physical Performance Show. What an incredible insight into what's becoming a remarkable career from Australian track runner Maddie Hills. I took so much from it. I hope you did too. Thanks very much for the feedback that's been coming in for last week's guest, Chloe McArdle. Just as with Chloe, if you take on Maddie's physical challenge this week, be sure to let both Madeline and myself know over on social by tagging us in. Any video that you've got is required for your physical challenge to be bona fide and certified. And if you've just got any feedback, let us know. We'd love to know that you listened to the show, took something from it, and enjoyed it. Guys, thanks so much to everyone that's been reviewing. As I mentioned at the start of the show, if you'd like to leave a review, please do so. It really helps this show get more visible. Likewise, if you'd like to subscribe to the Physical Performance Show, it's simple. Just click subscribe from within your app, and the shows will automatically update each week as they go live. A big thank you to Daryl Misson, who makes this show possible. He's our audio engineer and guru. Also, big shout out to Susan Wilkin, the show's VA, who, without both of you, this show wouldn't be possible. Big thank you always to yourselves, the faithful listeners, and if you're enjoying it, feel free to share it around. I know that many of you have been passing it on to your colleagues in your respective sports, and that's a real thrill when I learn of people that have come across the show through being shared and tagged by others, yourselves, the faithful listeners. Lastly, if you're into running, you can now pick up your copy of my Amazon running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain-Free, over on Audible or iBooks. It's also available in Kindle or paperback versions from Amazon internationally or at POGO Physio.com.au online inside Australia. There's been almost 5,000 people who enjoy this book now, so if you're looking to discover what it takes to enjoy injury-free running, the 5-step methodology I share in the 330 pages of the book will go a long way in helping you see that 2017 is your best year of running. Coming up in next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, I catch up with John Shaw. John Shaw is an Australian running legend. Now, you may not have heard of John, but after listening in to next week's episode, I'm sure you won't forget who John is. John came to my attention when in the 2016 Gold Coast Airport Marathon, John crossed the line in a remarkable 2 hours, 45 minutes and 23 seconds. What's remarkable about this time, aside from the time itself, is that John ran this time at an incredible 63 years of age. Yes, you heard correctly, 2 hours, 45 minutes for the marathon at 63 years of age. This run was John's 4th marathon. It was also the single age 63 years world record for the marathon. More remarkable than that is that John only took to running at the age of 59 years. So in next week's episode, I unpack John's journey. What was he doing for all those years with sitting on all that running talent? And where's he going now he's got his head down? What goals is he pursuing? Guys, this is an interview that you won't forget, I promise. It's an absolute ripper. So look forward to sharing it with you next week on the Physical Performance Show. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.